Hi Guys, the man entrusted with managing one of the most notorious forced labour complexes in European history, boasted about his administrative efficiency just days before his heavily fortified empire completely crumbled into dust. This is the factual account of Franz Ziereis, a low-ranking commercial carpenter who rapidly evolved into the supreme commander of a sprawling facility where hundreds of thousands of individuals were deliberately sent to face unthinkable and extreme conditions. Born in the city of Munich in the year 1905, Ziereis initially chose a path entirely removed from the military or political spheres. He worked diligently as a commercial apprentice and a carpenter, but the profound economic turbulence of the 1920s pushed him toward a completely different calling. He formally joined the military forces in 1924, serving without significant distinction for over a decade before aggressively transitioning to the elite paramilitary units in 1936. His subsequent rise through the strict ranks was not fueled by any battlefield brilliance or tactical genius, but rather by his unwavering bureaucratic compliance and a cold, highly calculating dedication to following orders blindly. By February 1939, his absolute administrative ruthlessness caught the direct attention of his highest superiors, leading directly to his permanent appointment as the Supreme Commandant of Mauthausen. Situated in the rugged terrain of Upper Austria, Mauthausen was absolutely not just another detention facility. It was officially designated as a Grade 3 camp. This was the most severe and punitive classification in the entire wartime system, strictly reserved for those individuals deemed the most uncompromising and dangerous political adversaries of the regime. The specific geographic location was chosen for its massive natural granite quarry, where the heavy stone desperately needed for grandiose architectural projects across the empire was to be extracted entirely by hand. When Ziereis arrived at his new post, he took total control of a relatively small, disorganized operation and systematically, methodically transformed it into a sprawling, heavily industrialized complex of immense human suffering. He personally oversaw the engineering and construction of the historically infamous Stairs of Death, a sheer, terrifying drop of exactly 186 steps, where exhausted inmates were forced to carry rough granite blocks weighing up to 50 kilograms on their bare backs. Ziereis operated his command not with frenzied emotional rage, but with a chilling, deeply detached professionalism that treated human lives as nothing more than expendable resources recorded on a massive administrative ledger. The core operational philosophy strictly enforced under Ziereis was firmly centered on what the wartime regime coldly and officially termed extermination through labour. Mauthausen, along with its massive primary subcamp known as Gusen, quickly became the darkest epicenter of this highly systematic strategy. By the pivotal year of 1943, the momentum of the global conflict was definitively shifting, and the desperate wartime economy demanded an absolutely endless supply of physical labour to continuously fuel its struggling industrial military complex. Ziereis brilliantly pivoted the primary function of his camp from simple granite quarrying to assembling highly complex military armaments and critical aircraft components. He aggressively established lucrative partnerships with major aerospace and manufacturing conglomerates, essentially leasing out his vast captive workforce for immense financial profit. Tens of thousands of diverse individuals from all across Europe, ranging from political dissidents and prisoners of war to targeted minority groups, were violently funneled into this dark, relentless industrial machine. The daily working conditions were meticulously calculated and mathematically designed to extract the absolute maximum amount of physical exertion, while providing the absolute minimum amount of basic sustenance. Inmates were forced to toil endlessly in sprawling, claustrophobic underground tunnel systems, specifically constructed deep within the mountains to protect the vital armament production lines from the relentless and highly destructive Allied aerial bombing campaigns. The Berg Crystal Project, widely recognized as one of the largest and most technologically advanced subterranean factories of the era, was carved out entirely by hand under Ziereis's extremely strict, unforgiving directives. The physical toll on the labor force was catastrophic and entirely intentional. The daily caloric intake was severely restricted, often plunging dangerously below 1,000 calories a day, while the brutal physical demands required impossible levels of stamina. Through all of this, Ziereis remained comfortably isolated from the staggering human cost of his meticulously kept ledgers, viewing the astronomical attrition rates simply as frustrating logistical hurdles that required more immediate transports of replacement personnel. His camp administration was uniquely characterized by extreme, uncompromising disciplinary protocols. He frequently conducted personal inspections of the work sites, always dressed in his impeccably tailored uniform, ensuring that the relentless, crushing pace of daily production never faltered for a single moment. The sprawling complex eventually held well over 85,000 individuals at its maximum peak capacity, a testament to his dark logistical efficiency. As the fateful spring of 1945 finally arrived, the previously invincible, ironclad facade of the totalitarian regime was rapidly crumbling into absolute chaos across all active fronts. The relentless, heavily armored advance of the Allied forces from the west, coupled with the overwhelming Soviet military juggernaut pushing from the east, violently squeezed the remaining occupied territories into a rapidly shrinking pocket of total disarray. By late April 1945, the highly structured administrative system that had comfortably insulated Ziereis for years was entirely broken. Essential communication lines with the High Command in Berlin were permanently severed, and the once rigid chain of command completely dissolved into rampant panic. Ziereis, fully realizing that his meticulously maintained administrative ledgers would now serve as his own highly detailed, undeniable indictment, immediately ordered the mass destruction of all camp documents. Thousands of files, detailed transport manifests, and strict operational records were hurriedly burned in massive bonfires in a frantic, desperate attempt to completely erase the shocking magnitude of his illegal operations. However, the physical, undeniable evidence of his vast forced labor network was far too massive to simply sweep away. On May 3rd, 1945, with heavily armed American armored divisions rapidly closing in on his position, Ziereis made his final, desperate tactical move. He permanently abandoned the sprawling complex he had ruthlessly commanded for exactly 6 years, leaving behind a completely chaotic, heavily fortified facility teetering on the absolute brink of total collapse. He cowardly fled deep into the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the PYHRN Mountains, located in Upper Austria, desperately seeking refuge in a heavily secluded hunting lodge he had previously prepared for exactly such an emergency contingency. He took his immediate family and a heavily armed, highly loyal detachment of personal guards, foolishly hoping to silently disappear into the chaotic, lawless aftermath of the shattered continent. Just 2 short days later, on May 5th, 1945, victorious troops from the heavily decorated 11th Armored Division of the United States Third Army finally arrived at the imposing front gates of Mauthausen. The battle-hardened American soldiers were entirely unprepared for the staggering, unimaginable scale of the historical tragedy they instantly uncovered. The liberators immediately began the monumental, highly complex task of providing urgent medical aid to the survivors. The highly organized military dragnet quickly closed in on the fleeing Franz Ziereis with absolute methodical precision. Specialized American intelligence units, effectively utilizing the highly invaluable geographical knowledge generously provided by local Austrian residents and brave former inmates, rapidly narrowed their extensive search grid. On the morning of May 23, 1945, a highly trained American patrol operating from the 81st Reconnaissance Squadron finally pinpointed the deeply secluded Alpine hunting lodge nestled incredibly high up in the Austrian mountains. The tactical element of total surprise was completely achieved. As the heavily armed American forces quietly approached the wooden cabin to permanently secure the surrounding perimeter, Ziereis instantly realized his long, cowardly evasion was definitively over. However, rather than bravely facing the inevitable, highly structured legal reckoning awaiting him, he foolishly chose to run. He suddenly bolted from the lodge, desperately attempting to lose himself deep within the dense, dark alpine forest. The American soldiers, operating under extremely strict tactical orders to immediately apprehend high-ranking figures for major tribunals, loudly commanded him to halt his advance. When he completely ignored multiple verbal warnings and stubbornly continued his desperate flight, the soldiers promptly opened fire. Ziereis was struck and critically wounded, his dramatic escape attempt abruptly and permanently halted on the cold forest floor. He was immediately apprehended, stabilized, and urgently transported under heavy armed guard to a specialized American military hospital, temporarily established in the nearby town of Gießen. Knowing his medical condition was entirely fatal, highly trained American military intelligence officers, closely accompanied by former camp inmates who served as vital translators, conducted a highly comprehensive, detailed interrogation directly at his bedside. In his final, painful hours, Ziereis provided a highly detailed, albeit entirely self-serving account of his vast administrative operations. He openly confirmed the massive operational scale of the facility, the staggering daily numbers of individuals processed, and the direct, undeniable orders he officially received from the highest echelons of the fallen regime. On May 24, 1945, Franz Ziereis succumbed entirely to his battle wounds, permanently escaping a formal courtroom trial, but completely failing to avoid the immediate brutal consequences of his own actions. The meticulously recorded evidence he ultimately left behind cemented his dark legacy, ensuring that the harsh light of historical justice would forever expose the undeniable truth of his command.